The date is set. Trump may be in front of a jury as early as mid-August. We'll discuss what that means for the former president as well as for the election. Then Hunter Biden pled guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges. We'll put his case in context and help you discuss it with family. We'll also discuss yet another lapse of Supreme Court ethics, this time involving Justice Alito. Finally, we'll discuss a little noticed Montana case that pits the state's youth against powerful political leaders. This is Majority 54.
All right, Jason. It looks like, Aileen Cannon, not exactly sure what's going on here, but I think August 14th, she set a preliminary date for the trial. Now, you were the trial lawyer, and I know this is a criminal case, which is not your expertise. Does this mean anything, or is this thing going to be pushed back?
I mean, it can easily be pushed back, but once you have the date of like when it is supposed to start, everything gets measured against that, right? So like you can do a continuance, you can do all that, but it is all continuing from that date. And I don't know, man. I mean, Trump makes everything so focused on his politics. Like, I think it's hard to tell whether or not. I mean, in a typical criminal case like this, you would think that the criminal defendant would probably not be in a hurry. They'd want to make sure that they, get out, particularly like when they're not in jail, right?
Right.
Like they'd want every opportunity to prepare their defense. But with Trump, like his defense is so often in the court of public opinion rather than
Right.
the court of law. And they may be thinking, or he may be thinking, well, my date that I care about is November of 2024. So let's
Right.
get this, whatever it's going to be behind us, especially knowing that if he gets convicted, it's going to be strung out in appeals for a long time anyway. Right. So
Well,
I think it could actually start then.
let's do the unthinkable, and Jason, pretend that you're in Trump's legal camp and political
Okay.
camp, because they're the same camp, right? You're a
Yeah.
political strategist and general counsel to the Trump campaign and Trump's main criminal defense attorney. You have a lot of hats here, in addition to being a podcast
Right.
host. Let me give you 2 scenarios here. You tell me which is better based on the probabilities. One is he tries to run out the clock for the election. We already talked about that one last week. I have a new one, which is with this early date, it's a Florida jury. Doesn't matter how strong the charges are. We live in a polarized America. The chances of him getting one person to not convict is get a hung jury. That would be great politically for him to be like, see, I'm innocent.
I'm
Which of these 2 are
exonerated.
you fighting? Yeah, which of these 2 are you pushing for? Quick trial,
Okay,
get a
so
hung jury, or run out the clock?
in this case, I'm his lawyer and his political advisor, right?
Yeah.
So in that case, what I would say is look, there's a small chance that you get acquitted. That'd be great. But if we do this now, knowing that we can string the appeals process out, we can make, if you're not acquitted, if you are convicted, which is more likely, then we can make this. I feel so, this is gross. I'm going to need a shower after this podcast. But I would say to him, if I were in that role, I would say, we can make the American public feel like this was just the beginning part of the process. So like you can get convicted and then we can be like, we're appealing it. There's no way this stands up on appeal. And we can act like, and as soon as we get an appellate court to accept the case, you just go out and talk about that like they've exonerated you, because a lot of your people aren't going to know the difference. Like, so if you're combining the two, that's probably what you do.
I'm starting to think quick trial is in Trump's interest here. I know this is a zag, but I'm thinking about this jury, and maybe I'm being cynical about how polarized we are, and the fact that you just need one of 12 people in this America in Florida to not go along with this case. Like, I think those chances are pretty high, and that's like a really good scenario for Trump. If he gets acquitted.
Well, the other side to that is that a quick trial means that they get to move on to the other cases quicker, and he gets hit with those quicker. But I guess it means that in a lot of ways, probably the most crucial part of this trial is going to be voir dire. It's going to be jury selection, right? Because how do you find an impartial jury on the subject of Donald Trump anywhere
It's impossible.
in America?
This thing is impossible. Absolutely impossible. And that's where, like, I think the venue, remember like the OJ trial, the fact that they held it downtown was actually critical. The fact that this is in Florida is so important. The fact that this is in Miami. I do think that, Yeah, man, I don't know. Like, this is gonna be very fascinating to see if it is in fact that fast, you know?
Yeah, I just like I don't know how they're going to have a standard for jury selection of impartiality that departs from your regular standard, right? I mean, this is literally like where you can look at people. I don't even know. Like everybody's going to have an opinion on him. He was president,
Yeah, and I
you
do think
know.
you probably have to sequester the jury, I would imagine. I would hope.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah, and and not only like yeah, you have probably sequester the jury. Now I don't know how long the trial is going to be, right? But like you have to sequester the jury, and then on top of that, it's like literally, I don't even know if you can ask this, but like everybody, the chances are that the people who end up on that jury probably they're registered voters.
yeah,
They
which is
probably
totally
voted.
you don't need, yeah,
At
you
some
could tell
point,
it.
they've rendered a judgment on this person.
Yeah, that's the problem. You almost want if you're if you're the prosecutors, you're not going to get Democrats on the jury probably, right? So your best case is people who've never voted in their lives, which how many of those people are in a jury pool? Because it is the registered voters, I think, that get you on the jury pool. So registered
That's the
voters who
rumor. You
haven't
never
voted.
really know if that's
Yeah.
real, but that's that it's a it's a thing that's out there, and unfortunately, sometimes keeps people from registering to vote.
Yeah.
But clearly, there's a cross section, and not only that, like your jury pool is also the people who answer the jury summons. So
Yeah.
the chance that they are the civically
Yeah.
minded
They're
folks
gonna answer they
anyway,
never vote. It's so crazy.
yeah, they're voters usually.
What a mess. Honestly, what a mess.
Yeah.
I almost
So
think we should move this trial to Iceland or something, to another country where people haven't voted in this election. We
but the
should
thing is
grant
like
them
that's
that.
probably for Trump. Is there a place other what? Let's see, like Turkey, Russia. There's not many venues
I
around the
bet he'd
world
do pretty well in
internationally.
Russia. I bet he'd
Yeah,
do pretty well.
but
North
I
Korea.
mean, we talk about a sequestered jury. They will
Yeah.
have no information whatsoever
But
other than
actually,
what the judge gives them.
the problem is there's documents about North Korea here, so we'd have to
There you go.
get the jury,
Now,
like, get the
now you
jury
got to
out of there.
redact.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be nothing but North Korean high-ranking military officers who have the clearance to see these documents. Yeah,
All
no,
right.
there's no easy way to do this.
Oh God, kill me now. All right, so Trump himself, he went on Brett Baer's program. Now, look, I don't know what to say about this, but Brett Baer somehow turned into Jake Tapper overnight in this interview. I don't know what else to say. He was very prepared. He held Trump accountable. You and I were talking offline, like, what the heck is going on at Fox News? I think it's just a big question. I'm here for it right now. I certainly don't have high hopes, but at least this interview, 2-day interview, I guess, was very hard hitting. We're going to go through some of these clips. Let's start with this this back and forth over Trump's cabinet. This is actually a very, again, I know our listeners are going to love me shouting out Fox News, but this was a very well delivered question. Let's go to this clip.
In 2016, you said that. I'm going to surround myself with only the best and most serious people.
Well, I did do that.
This
and we
time,
had tremendous, look, we had the best economy we've ever had. The world has ever seen.
Your Vice President, Mike Pence, is running against you.
Yeah.
Your Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, she's running against you. Your former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, said he's not supporting you. You mentioned National Security Advisor John Bolton. He's not supporting you either. You mentioned Attorney General Bill Barr, says you shouldn't be president again, calls you the consummate narcissist and troubled man. You recently called Barr a gutless pig. Your second defense secretary is not supporting you, called you irresponsible. This week, you and your White House called your White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, weak and ineffective and born with a very small brain. You called your acting White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, a born loser. You called your first Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, dumb as a rock, and your first Defense Secretary, James Mattis, the world's most overrated general. You called your White House Press Secretary, Kayleigh Canadian, milquetoast, and multiple times you've referred to your Transportation Secretary, Elaine Chao, as Mitch McConnell's China-loving wife. So, why did you hire all of them in the first place?
Because I hired 10 to 1 that were fantastic. We had a great economy. We had phenomenal people in charge of the economy. We had phenomenal people in the military. I'm not a fan of Milley, and I'm not a fan of certain of the television people. But I knocked out ISIS. I defeated ISIS. They said, Mattis, It would take 3 years, and I don't think we can do it. I did it in a period of like 4 weeks.
There's a lot of people who praise you for your policies. I just said that.
That's true. Well, I mean, you just went through a list. But don't forget, for every one you say, I had 10 that love us.
Okay. A couple of things about this. One, great job by Bear, because what he didn't do is he didn't ask the follow-up question that Trump was inviting, which was, well, name some of the people who,
right?
You know, because Trump would have he would have either not rattled off anybody and just acted like there were tons like he did, or he would have, you know, it lets him out of it. And so it was smart the way he did it. But then also, look, man, as a politician, you got to hand it to Trump. You could see Trump, I mean, only for his political skill, but you can see before he even asked the question, Trump is already pivoting into his, remember how great the economy was when I was president, which is not right, but whatever, into that talking point. And then they ask the question, and it is a devastating buildup and actual question. And Trump just completely just waves it off, doesn't accept the premise, and goes quickly into having the viewer forget what the question was and goes back to talking about what he wanted to talk about. So they were kind of both at the top of their game there, I guess.
Yeah, well, I guess what it means for Trump to be at the top of his game is always fascinating to me.
It's just to keep saying the same BS he always says. But the other thing, for those who listened and didn't see it, Fox, like, they were playing the images of Trump patting each of those people that was mentioned on the back, shaking their hand, like clearly Trump, you know, trust transferring onto each of those people who they were then laying out how they're all crapping all over him now.
Unbelievable. I mean, you know, one issue Trump has had is that he's had a hard time keeping together a legal team. And this next clip, I think, can help explain why. Let's go to this video.
I don't want to dwell on it, but according to the indictment, you were here at Bedminster on July 21st, 2021, after you're no longer president, and you were recorded saying that you had a document detailing a plan of attack on another country that was prepared by the U.S. military for you when you were president, the Iran attack plan. You remember that?
Ready?
You were recorded.
It wasn't a document.
Okay.
I had lots of paper. I had copies of newspaper articles. I had copies of magazines.
I know. This is specifically a quote. You're quoted on the recording saying the document was secret, adding that you could have declassified it while you were president, but, quote, now I can't. You know, this is still secret, highly confidential. And the indictment cites the recording and the testimony from people in the room saying you showed it to people there that day. So you say on this, on tape,
it says just the opposite,
that you can't declassify it, so why have it?
When I said that I couldn't declassify it now, that's because I wasn't president. I never made any bones about that. When I'm not president, I can't declassify.
And that's what you said. You didn't declassify it.
I said no. I said I couldn't.
But that
wasn't a document, Brett. There was no document. That was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things. And it may have been held up or may not, but that was not a document. I didn't have a document per se. There was nothing to declassify. These were newspaper stories, magazine stories, and articles.
I'm just saying what the indictment says.
Well,
the recording and the people in the room who testified.
These people are very dishonest people. They're thugs. They're thugs. If you look at what they've done to other people, what they've done and overturned in the U.S. Supreme Court, these are thugs.
The suggestion was that you wanted this as evidence that the military, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, had preemptively sent you plans for a possible attack on Iran and that you didn't order that to happen. That's the suggestion.
I never ordered it to happen, no.
But that's why you wanted the document.
I don't think I've ever seen a document from Milley. Milley, frankly, was incompetent. The last one I'd want to attack with as my leader would be Milley. That I can tell you.
All right, last thing on this.
I mean, wow. Like, okay, now you play his lawyer. He comes out of that interview and you're like, what's your legal advice for him?
Well, I think he did the first thing you want your defendant to do, which is openly discuss your innocence in rather undisciplined ways and make things up that are verifiably
on the spot.
Yeah, make it up on the spot, say things that are verifiably false. Yeah, I mean, that's what else could you ask for in a defendant?
Look, we all know that a bunch of paper is not a document. Yeah. I mean, that's like everyone knows that. It's a bunch of paper. Like,
yeah, look, like if it's a bunch of paper, look, if it were a notepad, would you call that a document yet? Like, is it a document until you've written on it?
And also, I like that He's like, no. Like clearly on the spot, he thinks up, no. What I was saying was, I obviously declassified this while I was president, but had I not, now I wouldn't be able to. Like that's like his completely made up, like, here's what I meant. And then by the end of the question, Trump's like, no, I never read a single document given to me by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff because he was so incompetent. I never received anything from him. Like that feels like the kind of thing that you might end up bringing up in court to impeach his credibility. Like, because I bet he saw some documents from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
He's like, he's the last guy I'd want to go attack another country with. I'm like, what kind of, this is a strange way to word that.
It's amazing. It's
well, okay.
Amazing.
Well, that wasn't the only legal discussion they had. They talked about a pardon or clemency, granting of clemency to this woman named Alice Johnson, who was convicted in 1996 for involvement in cocaine trafficking. Bear had to do a little bit of educating of Trump. Let's go to this clip.
Can I say before we even play this, what I love about this is it appears to me that Trump brought this up himself.
Yes.
Like unprompted, and Bear was ready with this educating of him. So
I know it's weird. I mean,
walk him into this.
This is the weirdest. I don't know, Brett. Like honestly, I don't know. I can only assume Brett Baer is another Fox News automaton who's been saying crazy things up until now. But he, just the first time I've ever watched. I mean, he definitely has it in him to be a real journalist.
He's a guy who seems to me like he, because he doesn't have an opinion show. I don't recall him being like a regular on like Fox and Friends in the morning. He seems to be a facilitator of BS, a facilitator of the BS more so than a creator of the BS.
Right. Yeah, in the ranking of these people. Okay,
right.
Let's go to this clip.
I focused on nonviolent crime. As an example, a woman who you know very well was in jail. She had 24 more years to serve. She served for 22 years. She had
Alice Johnson.
Alice.
She was in the Super Bowl.
High quality. Oh, yeah. I said, how many years? And she was on a telephone call, and they were involved in selling marijuana, mostly marijuana. And she got like 50 years in jail.
But she'd be killed under your plan.
Huh?
As a drug dealer.
No. Under that, it would depend on the severity. It would depend on the severity.
She's technically a former drug dealer. She had multi-million-dollar cocaine ring.
Any drug dealer, look.
So even Alice Johnson in that ad.
She can't do it, okay? By the way, if that was there, no, she wouldn't be killed. It would start as of now, so you wouldn't go to the past.
I know, but your policy.
No. Starting now, yeah.
I mean, like, I love it when he goes.
His face. Like, I've never seen Trump's face look like that before. Like
he was like,
his eyes were like, he was like, "What? My policy?" He's like, "What?" And then he's like, "Oh yeah, I did say I was going to execute drug dealers."
And then he goes, and then he goes. It would depend on the severity. Like what I love about that,
he's just making up a new policy on
totally
the spot.
making it up, but also like,
but it's involving executing people. It's not even like, hey, what the sort of like the fuel economy standard should be. It's like, maybe in this vehicle, you're like, all right, maybe I wouldn't execute her. You're right.
Like, he just got done. Yeah. There's the freeze frame of his. Good job, Brett. But like, yeah, he just got done. Like as passionate as Trump can get and displaying the maximum amount of like humanity and emotion that Trump is able to mimic while talking about Alice Johnson, right? He just got done humanizing this woman and talking about how unfair it is. And then this new fact is introduced that she would have possibly been executed. And Trump just really just tosses off like, it would depend on the severity. Like basically like, yeah, we might have killed her, I mean, it's remarkable, man.
I could watch this all day. I think, okay, so that's Trump. We're just checking in Trump world.
Well, let's talk for a second about you raised what is happening at Fox. I mean, one scenario is Brett Baer is just like, I'm Brett Baer. I'm going to be like, maybe he's replacing Chris Wallace or Shep Smith as the guy who like, no, I'm going to try and do real stuff here. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's a reason that this interview went into day 2. Like in the old days, if day 1 is rough, Trump can call and Bear can get some guidance from corporate, and day 2 goes very differently, right? So why doesn't that happen? And I think the reason that doesn't happen is because Fox News is the Republican Party establishment, and the Republican Party establishment would very much like to rid itself of Trump. And so I think we're going to see more of this,
Yeah. Another, it could also be that they have finally realized that the new media ecosystem is going to birth a million super duper right wing extremist groups, and that maybe their best pivot is like Republican, but not InfoWars Republican,
Right.
and like maybe that's their new lane is like, hey, like we could be that conservative news network that is like that grass tops, like whatever. I don't know, but it'll be interesting. Like, I think it's a fascinating change. Like, I certainly don't have a lot of like, you know, uh, faith in the people over there, but obviously the lawsuit is relevant. The changing of the hands to the new son, who by all estimation is also very right wing. But like, it is noticeable the difference over the past few weeks.
Look, if you were going to build an audience around the people who are like, I don't like Trump, but I vote Republican, like the people who are like, I voted Republican or I voted for Trump. I don't like Trump, but I voted for Trump. That's not enough to win you an election, but it's certainly a big enough audience for you to continue to make billions of dollars as a cable news network.
Yeah.
Well,
okay, let's talk about this Hunter Biden guilty plea. So he pled guilty to misdemeanor tax charges and will likely avoid prison time. I think it involved unreported $30,000 in taxes and failing to disclose on a form to get a firearm that he was using drugs. And this is an investigation that was being conducted by David Weiss, who was the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney for Delaware. And I think what's notable here, Jason, is this was a guy who Biden kept on to investigate his own son, a guy who was appointed by Trump. Biden stayed out of the investigation. Garland stayed out of the investigation. And Biden hasn't attacked this U.S. attorney. He's accepted these charges. I would say it's a notable difference to how the previous president would have handled such a thing.
Yes. And I mean, the previous president was firing FBI directors,
Right?
Like who, by the way, are appointed to like terms, if I recall correctly.
Right.
And so he was like intervening in these terms. And, and for those who don't know, U.S. attorneys they're not appointed that way. Like they're like ambassadors. When a new president comes in, it is absolutely customary for that president to get to appoint a new U.S. attorney to every U.S. attorney district, every federal, every district in the country, right? So it would not have, I mean, maybe people would have said something, but it would have been following the customary rules for Biden to appoint a new U.S. attorney in Delaware, just like he did in pretty much everywhere else. So it's like Biden had to, it's like he had to take an action to, he had to go against what the norm is to leave a Trump appointed U.S. attorney in there in his home state, in the place, because it's like, let's be real. It ain't like there's not hundreds of people who were thinking when Biden became president that they were about to be the U.S. attorney, right? Like lots of lawyers who Biden has had close ties to for many, many years. So it's not just that he could have appointed like a loyal U.S. attorney. He could have appointed a U.S. attorney from his home state who would have been like a friend of the family, and it would have been like following the way things are usually done. And instead he left in somebody who was appointed by Trump to investigate and prosecute his own son.
It's this three-dimensional chess in the Biden dictatorship.
Yes,
like
clearly.
You just can't see it, you can't see these moves, but he's onto something here. But okay. So when you think about this, here's what you need to do with your family. You need to remind your family members who are independents or right-leaning people of what we just said, which is that this, like, as tragic as the situation is, demonstrates yet again that Biden is not the dictator people on the right are trying to make him out to be. You contrast his behavior to what Trump has done every step of the way, and it's totally appropriate. The second thing is, after all these allegations, Burisma, China, the Biden family corruption, Joe Biden's involvement in his son's business practices, et cetera, this is what we get at the end of the process. It seems like this is what the charges are going to be. And so there should be some explaining going on the right about, oh yeah, whatever happened to all this conspiracy theorizing that you've been peddling? Like at the end of it, you have a $30,000 unreported tax charge and a firearm form. Like, come on. Like the guy was addicted to crack, right? Like, so it's like, this is what we get, right? And nobody would even, and by the way, and I'm not even saying this was inappropriate, but nobody other than Hunter Biden gets these charges, right? Like, it's not like they're going after the rand, like they found these because they were looking at the president's son, right?
I would encourage anybody who, Hunter Biden has not done a lot of interviews. And he did do one. He did one with Mark Maron on the WTF podcast, like, I guess it's like 2 years ago now. And it's a wide ranging conversation. It's about an hour long. And it's, Maron is a guy who's been sober for a couple of decades and had done the 12 steps because of struggles he had with drugs. And so it's a really interesting conversation. But if you take out your knowledge, if you listen to the conversation, you take away your knowledge that Hunter Biden is at the time of the interview the son of, I think I don't know if Biden was running or if he was president already at the time of the interview, but it's just two guys who have struggled with a drug addiction talking, and that's who Hunter Biden is. Like, I've never met Hunter Biden, but like from what I can tell, Hunter Biden is a guy who had a really bad drug addiction, and probably, I think he's sober now, but like I don't think that's a struggle that ever goes away.
Right.
And on top of that, had the weight of, being like the mascot, the anti-mascot for the right, on his shoulders. And not to mention growing up with like a lot of trauma, right? Like, I mean, being in a car accident where he lost his mother and his sister, and then later losing his brother to cancer. Like, the dude's been through a lot. And like, I'm not saying like it excuses his behavior, but I'm saying like, it's not that atypical of an American story or of a story of somebody who's been through a lot of trauma. And they're having to do a lot of extra work to connect it to some kind of corruption on Joe Biden's part.
Right. So, I mean, it's a really sad chapter. And I think like in the end, we were promised so much more. Like, we were promised some grand conspiracy. Trump even tried to pressure the Ukrainian government to bring to trump up evidence here. Like that's how far this has gone, And this is what we get. Something that every listener to this podcast knows somebody who did not report something on their taxes. Like there's 100% true that somebody. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying they shouldn't prosecute people for not reporting things on their taxes, but every one of you knows somebody who's done that. That's what they got him on at this point. After all of that, the full weight of the right-wing machine, this is what we get.
And like, I'll even say, is it possible, given that it's a plea agreement, that there was stuff that they didn't charge as part of the plea agreement that was part of the deal of him? Yeah, it's entirely possible. But the likelihood that it was like international corruption, going up to the president, no, that's not possible. That was not part of it. It was other stuff that amounted to basically bad decisions people make when they're addicted to drugs as adults, right? I think that's really what this case is about.
Yeah, and one last thing here, because the inevitable comparison to Kushner and to all the Trump kids inevitably is made. What's different here, among many, many things, one of which is that he actually was held accountable for his behavior and those others have not been yet, is that most of those other Kushner, Ivanka, Trump Jr. are all involved in the administration and the political project of Donald Trump explicitly. Right. Hunter Biden has been on the sidelines. I don't even know. Like, it's like he's like a total non-actor in this larger political drama going on, whereas all these other grifter kids are very much squarely in the middle of Donald Trump's project. And so to me are way more fair game. Have not been held accountable, but should be more fair game.
if you look back at what most of Hunter Biden has tried to do professionally, like, yes, he sat on some boards, and like, I'll be the first to admit, like,
Probably
did
shouldn't have
he?
been on. Yeah.
Yeah, did he get offered some boards because of his last name? Probably. I mean, I'm certain, probably so, right? But did he then, like, did his father then go and use it? No. Like, can his father do anything about the fact that that his son accepts offers from things that, because, like, there are a lot of people in this country who get things because somebody's trying to connect with their father.
Yeah,
or
like
their
a
mother,
like
right?
$1 billion from the Saudis, right? Like
Right,
with
like $1
Kushner.
billion
Yeah.
from the Saudis. And
like,
but like, so there are those things, and like, I think it would be disingenuous to say that doesn't, like, look a little shady, right?
for
But
sure.
that doesn't,
Yeah.
but that's a reflection on, it can be a reflection on the desperation of someone with a drug habit. It can be a reflection on the bad decisions of somebody who's got a substance problem. It can be a reflection on the character, I think that's fine, of Hunter Biden. What it is not a reflection on, Hunter Biden is 53 years old. It is not a reflection on his father, who has nothing to do with any of that, right?
Right.
Not at that age. And I mean, heck, they're trying to tell us every day how old Joe Biden is. Okay. So, like, at some point, it's not like it's his son who's misbehaving in the first grade and you hold him accountable. That's not what this is. And to your point, there was not a moment where Joe Biden was like, you know what? Let's make you part of the family business. Why don't you come be an advisor in my White House? Like, that didn't happen.
The story
That's the
isn't
difference.
consistent. He's you're right. It's either he's like this senile old man who can't do anything, and it's
Right.
like Weekend at Bernie's, or he's this like mastermind of like a criminal conspiracy. It's almost like in their world, I forgot the name of the mafia don who used to walk around in his pajamas in New York. And then he was like secretly behind the scenes, like this ruthless guy, but he like put on this front because he was trying to get some insanity plea or something. I guess that's what they're trying to say Biden is, which honestly would be quite, I almost hope that's the version the right deserves.
That's a great pitch for a weekly show.
That's
what that is. That'd be, we should write that pilot.
Well, okay. Well, we'll do that while we take a break. We'll listen to some sponsors and start sketching out this TV show. When we come back, we're going to talk about Justice Alito getting rather aggressive out there in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, pushing back against some ethics allegations or unethics allegations. And then we're going to talk about some kids in Montana who are mounting a legal case that we should at least pay some attention to. All of that and more when we come back. Our next partner is AG1, the daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I drink it every single day. I have for years, well before they even sponsored this podcast. And I love it because it gets you a better gut health. It gives you a boost in energy. It helps your immune system. And in many ways, it's replaced so many of the pills I was taking for so many different things. You get just so much out of this drink, and it tastes awesome. And since I've been drinking this, I've noticed a major change in so much of my life and my energy. I actually drink it now instead of my first cup of coffee in the morning, and I give myself just a chance to just like naturally gain my energy and focus. And so if you're looking for a simpler, effective investment for your health, try AG1. You get 5 free AG1 travel packs. That's what I've been using here on the road. And you get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D with your first purchase. So go to drinkag1.com/majority. That's drinkag1.com/majority to check it out. All right. Well, okay. We have now been paraded with a series of major ethical lapses from the Supreme Court. We've been talking about it, I think, for years now. And obviously, we had the Thomas Harlan Crow stuff we talked about. ProPublica, which continues to just write amazing stuff. We're about to put out an article about Samuel Alito, who traveled on a private jet with Paul Singer, the hedge fund manager. And I think he owns the Mets. You would know this. He's a hedge fund manager and right-wing figure, I guess. And the trip would have cost
I think it's Cohen who owns the Mets, right?
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Sorry. No,
he has his own legal issues, as I recall.
Yeah. And Singer Yeah, I don't mean to disparage the Mets. I'll get some angry messages from Staten Island. This was a trip on a private jet that would have cost $100,000 one way if the justice had chartered himself. And after said trip, I think a couple years later, Singer had multiple cases over the years after that before the Supreme Court. Alito Jason, he wasn't going to sit by and let ProPublica write this article.
Yes, he did what we call in the business. He got out in front of it, and he got out in front of it in like an indignant kind of way. It seems like that seems to be his approach, right? It's
he wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal before the ProPublica article came out, and he defended himself. And there's one part of this that I thought I think deserves some attention, which is he said that the seat would have been empty otherwise. Otherwise been vacant. Jason, what do you think of that argument?
Well, I mean, it makes sense because I'm not sure any other Supreme Court justices were available to go. And so I think he's right. Like if you've got this nice perk, this nice this benefit that you're going to give to someone of influence, and one guy takes it, but the other guys and gals weren't available. I think he's right. I think it otherwise would have been. I think clearly this plane would have otherwise just been going there empty to this wonderful destination, taking no one on it. I mean, what an amazing argument. That's why he's one of our top lawyers, ladies and gentlemen, I guess.
Well, let's take this to its logical conclusion, right? Like candidates for federal office, we have requirements that they disclose donations to their campaigns. We also have limits on what people can donate. But let's just say, like, yeah, you're Mayor Pete, you're campaigning through the country, and George Soros happens to be going to LA too, and you hop on that. You don't disclose that, right? You don't disclose that trip. That seems strange.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I mean, all jokes aside, obviously the point is not the trouble that Mr. Singer had to go to have you get to this place. The point is that you got to go to this place and do this thing without spending $100,000 of your own dollars. That would be the point.
The fact that the Supreme Court continues to not have any ethics enforcement is beyond me. And Roberts, who, gets all the credit in the world for being this even-handed guy who's like the centrist on the court, as people would say, and like the guy who cares about respectability, refused to testify in front of Congress about Supreme Court's ethics lapses. There seems to be one every day. And it's not, and Alito also claimed that he didn't know that Singer had business before the court, but he also claimed that it wouldn't have mattered either way. So it's not even why he even made this argument is beyond me. But ProPublica made clear that there was, and as did the Wall Street Journal, that there was plenty of evidence in the public record, many articles written about how Singer had a victory before the Supreme Court. So it's incumbent upon you, Alito, to know that when you accept money from billionaires. But this is why you disclose the gift in the first place,
right?
Because then the public can tell you that, right? So you disclose, hey, I don't think you should be allowed to accept that gift, but let's put that aside. Let's say you are allowed to accept it. Disclosing it means that when that case is being briefed before the Supreme Court, the many Supreme Court reporters can point out, hey, perhaps Alito should recuse himself from this because we found this thing from a couple years ago where he received a rather sizable, expensive gift from somebody who has something to benefit from here. And we're not saying Alito is actually bought and sold, but this is the highest court in the land, lifetime appointments. We should create the appearance we want to get rid of the appearance of impropriety. That's what all ethics rules are all about, really, is you assume like the absolute worst scenario and you ensure the public, hey, none of that's going on here. But I guess Supreme Court is above the law.
And the whole idea here is like, well, but are we just supposed to trust you 100% that you didn't know?
First of all, I don't trust him. But even if you did, it's not the point, right? Like you do this because we've given you a lifetime appointment to make the most important legal decisions. And by the way, if you're a federal court judge or a state court judge, every one of them now has to do this, right? It's crazy.
So we're just like, that's the thing, is like their version of this is that we should just assume that the Supreme Court justices are keeping track of who all is involved in all these cases, which one, I don't think we want them doing. I don't think we want them figuring out who the investors are in the different companies. Like, I don't
Yeah,
think
by the way, he's not keeping track, to his admission.
right.
So it's
But,
like,
and if it is his responsibility to do it, I don't think we want that. I don't think we want them trying to figure out who's on which side of each case. We want them only evaluating the legal part, which is why it's so important to disclose this stuff so other people can do it for you. And I also think that him and, well, any Alito and any other justice that this happens with now going forward is missing an enormous opportunity right now, because the thing that happened with Clarence Thomas and was it Harlan Crow, is that the guy's name, was just a wipe the slate clean moment. I mean, it was just an opportunity for you to be like, you know what? I going forward here, and for Roberts to say going forward, here are going to be the rules, because there's so many, there's a context for this in American life right now. Like with the way we are changing the way we use language, the way inclusion works. Like there are now a lot of people who are having to say, yeah, you know, I was listening, you probably listened to it too. We both listened to the rewatchables. I was listening to the one about the third Indiana Jones movie, and they were talking about how Spielberg looks back at Temple of Doom, which has a lot of stereotypes in it, and he's not particularly proud of it. But no one's trying to cancel Spielberg for that, because Spielberg is saying, yeah, when I look back, I don't like that. I wouldn't do that in the future. So we're now at a societal point where that has entered the conversation in a much more real way. That ability to create some sort of sense of like, okay, you're not going to be held responsible for the stuff that a lot of people weren't being held responsible for then, but you're expected to know now. That this is a moment where somebody like Alito, his response to this investigation by ProPublica could have been like, yes, this is why I now disclose all these sort of things. I didn't know this. I wasn't acting, in a way that's unethical, but I think we've learned a lot. And I think going forward, the best practice would be to disclose, period.
Honestly, that's closer to what Thomas did.
It is actually, yes.
Alito is actually, I've long felt that Alito is the most petulant, untrustworthy person on the Supreme Court. And this is just more evidence of that. And Sheldon Whitehouse raised an interesting question, the senator from Rhode Island, that he's like, who plays this? Feels like a PR thing. Like
right.
Alito, like, was there a PR firm to help? Now, who paid for that? And was that a
great question?
You know, like, are they now? What's really going on here is perks are really hard to dislodge. So right now, a lot of these justices on the Supreme Court, now it's part of their lifestyle, right? They easily could make more money if they left the Supreme Court and obviously were a partner at a law firm or whatever. And a lot of them were partners at law firms before they took these jobs. And so they're like, I want to behave like a rich person, but I'm on a government salary. And that's fundamentally what's going on here, is they do not want to give up their ability to like live a lavish lifestyle. And they think, like every arrogant person who's ever, like the most arrogant people are, like, they're like, we're smart and ethical enough to make our own calls. And everybody else has to live by a different set of rules. And by the way, that's their job, is to sit in judgment on everybody else. But God forbid we try to hold them to any semblance of a standard. And then it's like, we're the pearl clutchers.
Nobody's even saying you shouldn't be able to go on these weird fancy retreats.
I'm actually saying that, but I would at least at the minimum say disclose it,
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's the point. It's like that it should be disclosed, and then you should recuse yourself, like, and everybody should know about it so that you can, because the thing about this stuff is, and I don't think this is a big secret to anybody, is that when you live in this world, and this is, I think, more naturally true for politicians who have to raise a lot of money for elected officials than for Supreme. But your point is a good one, which is most of these people come from the law firm world and that kind of thing, is that you do get to know insanely wealthy people. Like you and I have both raised money for political causes and for other causes. And as part of that work, you develop relationships. It's like part of the job. You build relationships that sometimes become friendships with people of really enormous wealth. And so, like, I'm not defending it. But I am saying that, like, it is in many cases part of this world that you like. I have a friend who is a good friend of mine, and was a friend of mine before he was a supporter, but he sold his business, became a very wealthy guy. And I think like 3 years ago, maybe, he lent us, like we spent like 3 days at his home in Tahoe as a family, like we did, but I'm not an elected official. I don't hold any, but if I did, obviously, I would have to disclose that had I been like still a Secretary of State or something like that. But I do recognize that these political relationships, these professional relationships become friendships, and you do these things. I'm generally probably more accepting of that than a lot of other people, but I absolutely believe that if you're in a position of public trust, it has to be disclosed. It's pretty simple.
Well, we don't really have much hope that anything's going to happen here. It's just yet another, these people are totally unaccountable, and I don't know what there is to do here. Well, let's end on one bright story here, which is in Montana. I confess to not fully understanding the law here, but there are a group of kids suing Montana, and basically Montana is defending their right to permit fossil fuel projects, and the kids are arguing that we should be taking climate change into account. And it seems like a really novel case, Jason. I don't know if you're able to poke around in this as somebody who was a trial lawyer. It's now at trial. So these kids are, and essentially you have this really interesting posture where the kids essentially have their own representation and then have the state on the stand defending their basically seems like rubber stamp permitting process in the state.
Well, and it has to do with the state constitution, right? With the state constitution because what people may not remember is that, Earth Day came out of, this period in the 70s and 80s, back when Richard Nixon was establishing the EPA, when it was a bipartisan, very trendy thing to be pro-environment, right? Before it became as polarized as it is now, when a lot of people were writing language about the environment into a lot of different laws and documents and probably corporate policies and everything else, that, the Montana Constitution had this line about a right to a clean and healthful environment, and like ahead of religion, ahead of speech. And that's what these plaintiffs are seizing on. And they're using it to assert that individual right, which is very interesting. And so I think it'll be fascinating. It'll be one thing to see how the trial court goes here, but it'll be another to see how like appellate courts are going to interpret the law on this, and whether because it is not the most specific of terms, right? But it reminds me of, there's lots of stuff that's in state constitutions that that actually become action oriented. Like, as you well know, working in the education world, there's a lot of states that periodically have lawsuits about what they call adequacy clauses, I think is how it's put, right? Which is like, and you might be able to explain it better than me, but it's that there is a right to an adequate level of spending on education. And then there's oftentimes some sort of definition about the percentage of the budget, right?
Yeah, it's really crazy. There was like a bunch of my classmates actually sued state of Connecticut while I was in law school on this. That is crazy and thorny and like wild, and has taken years. Like that one Connecticut case, I think, lasted up until very recently, from when I was in law school. I think like the fact that, as Politico said, the mere fact that the trial is happening is the real news. This is their words. And they said state lawmakers have insulated regulators pretty well from it via the law they passed this spring, barring consideration of climate change and evaluating projects. So they passed a law saying you cannot consider climate change.
So then the question is whether the law is constitutional.
Yeah, that's what it's
in the state, right?
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to shout them out. Good way, because there's a lot of dark stuff in this episode today. So I just wanted to end on a more positive note. But okay, one for us. What's happening in your world out there?
Well, before we even do that, I have a grab and or, and I was just going to say, like, that example of the kids in Montana is like a perfect example of grab and or. Like, it's just like take what you have and run with it and try and make a difference. I was just thinking for grab and or, like, ProPublica, which we keep shouting out on this show for their investigative journalism, it's their tagline is investigative journalism in the public interest. It is a nonprofit. You can go to ProPublica.org and you can donate. And I just thought for grab and or, I would throw that out there, since we keep shouting them out, that I would encourage people to support that kind of journalism, because clearly it is actually making a difference and holding some people accountable. But you go ahead. I always go first with the one for us.
Oh, I'm in Austin, Texas, and this city, man, it reminds me of Nashville. It's like every time I come here, it just looks different. It's just rapidly changing, and a lot of people here, just like people in Nashville, which I was just back in Nashville a couple weeks ago, they have like some complicated things to say about it. But man, is it an exciting city to be in. There is just so much energy and innovation here. And I was just saying this yesterday, like the best looking people in all of America. Like I'm sitting at this coffee shop and like there's like a gym next door to it. And honestly, everybody who walks out of it looks like an Olympic athlete. I'm like, this place is like the healthiest place I've ever seen in my life. Like, honestly, like I think they need to be testing everybody here for performance enhancing drugs. Like, I think there's something going on here. Like it's conspiracy in the city of Austin.
It's pretty impressive that everybody is that fit in a place where I've done the food truck tour in Austin.
Food is good in this town,
and it is, yeah, man. I mean, it would be hard for me to maintain a healthy lifestyle, like if I were working in downtown Austin. What is it, Congress Street or whatever?
I am literally on Congress Street right now,
yeah.
and it was over 100 degrees yesterday, and I'm going from here to Jackson, Mississippi, where I believe it's even hotter. And then I'm probably going to New Orleans, back to New York. So I'm literally doing a tour like of the hottest places in America right now. So that's my life.
Well, have fun with that. My one for my little update is about the refugee family, the Afghan family that I mean, you're very familiar with the story, obviously, and some of the audience is. The shortest, truncated version is that I got very involved in getting this family that I was connected to through my translator out, and they have like an incredible story in and of themselves, and that became a nonprofit that has gotten a lot of people out of Afghanistan. But they were in Albania for 20 months after we got them out in September of 2021, waiting for the U.S. government to hopefully, grant them refugee status to come into the United States. It finally happened about 2.5 weeks ago, and they came here to Kansas City to be near family, and that family is the Kander family, because they don't have anybody else in the United States. And it has been, I can't even begin to describe to you how meaningful and incredible the last few weeks have been. The last 2.5 weeks, they live 6 minutes driving from our house, and they're in these apartments, and like, Diana, who today is her birthday, and Diana, as you know,
happy birthday, Diana.
She, I don't think, listens anymore to the show that we make so many of these, but I will tell her you said that.
What is she now? 40, Diana?
42. It's her Jackie Robinson birthday, so she's 6 weeks younger than me. And she came to the United States at the age of 8 from Ukraine as a refugee with her family, speaking no English, was resettled by the exact same Kansas City resettlement agency that we've been working with. And so it's just been so cool. And also this family of 14 includes 3 girls who are that age that she was. And so to watch these little girls connect with her, to watch these kids connect with our kids, and just to get to hang out. These are wonderful people, and we're spending a ton of time with them. We have dinner over there frequently. We all sit around on the floor, and like it's all both sides of it are like, we're all family now. Like that's incredible. It's how we all feel. And it has just been the most meaningful and enriching thing, and so cool to watch. Like, for 2 years, I obviously was the lead in our family in terms of getting them out of Afghanistan, getting them out of Albania. And now they're here, and I'm still very involved in helping them with a lot of stuff. But now it's like 75-25, and 75% of it is Diana coordinating. Hey, they need a lamp in this room. Hey, I don't think they have enough groceries for this weekend. Like, it's just been amazing.
Can I ask you something about this related to your book? So, and feel free not to answer this, but based on everything you wrote about in your book, about what you've been going through and had to overcome, and with PTSD and everything from Afghanistan, does the fact that they're in Kansas City help you in your recovery, or does it have the opposite, or is it just neutral?
Well, look, here's how it helps. It helps in that, like, it's a great question. I ended up, as you know, I think, going back to the VA for an additional round of trauma therapy because of the experience of getting so involved with the evacuation efforts and just what they call Schindler's List syndrome of, like, there's people we couldn't get out, people who, I was corresponding with. And so having them here, I think, is somewhat healing for that. But I think if it's the way it relates to all that for me is like, I'm a big believer in the idea that the way out of trauma is not redemption, because, like, that's what the movies teach us. That's the Top Gun thing of, like, oh, you just go kill some of the bad guys and you get over Goose's death.
Yeah.
So I don't believe in that. But at the same time, given that a big part of, like, maybe not my initial trauma, but my survivor's guilt was about feeling like I had not done enough in Afghanistan and that kind of thing, like, to have been actively involved in saving the lives of a lot of Afghans, and then to get to watch these kids grow up and actually see it. I may be totally independent of, like, what I went through in the past, but either way, it's super meaningful, and it's the best thing it's the best thing I've ever done. And so it's just like, there was a moment last week where there was a free festival and there's 14 of them. So, like, when we all want to go somewhere together, it's quite an undertaking, right? We have to get multiple vehicles, get some friends to help volunteer. And we all went down to the Kaufman Performing Arts Center in Kansas City for this Future Stages festival. It was like musicians or kids putting stuff on, and the Performing Arts Center Kansas City is just this beautiful place that you could find in Sydney or New York or any of the world's greatest cities. And just, I'm on one end of this long row in this theater, and Diana's on the other end, and in between us is True and Bella and our entire extended Afghan family. And seeing these kids be in this beautiful space, and they've never seen anything like this, and, like, and I teared up because it's just like, I went weeks trying, knowing everything about the kids in this family and the people in this family, and just, desperately trying to get them out of harm's way while the Taliban was trying to find them. And then after that, over a year trying to get them out of a country where they didn't speak the language and they didn't have the right to work and they didn't know whether they were going to have to go back to Afghanistan or whatever, to now, like, they live down the street and we see them all the time. And
That's
like,
crazy.
We have inside jokes with each other at this point, and they're just part of our family. It's truly surreal, and it's just been just a real privilege. I mean, not to mention the fact that, like, they keep thanking us, but, like, it's a blessing to us, like, to be able to do that. But also, like, my kids, like, let's be real, like, my kids are growing up with a certain degree of privilege, right? And
For sure.
I cannot imagine something better to grant them perspective than to, end up with, like, little cousins or brothers and sisters or whatever informally they'll come to feel these kids are that they play with now, who are refugees, who are starting with nothing, and live down the street. It's just, it's wonderful for all of us, and it's making everybody's lives better and the entire extended family. And it's just so cool, and it's fun to be able to talk about.
Well, congrats, man. I'm super happy for you. I can't wait to meet them when I come down there for the Bills' inevitable victory this year.
You will. Well, I'm priming them to care about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
we got the kids some home shirts, and so you
Look,
will.
it's only up for them here. I mean, what a lucky city to my team is imploding. We're not going to talk about that, but everybody now, all last year, everybody was saying the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl this year. Everybody's like, the Bills are done, which I actually prefer. I prefer that narrative.
Yeah, you don't want the expectations. That's terrible. That's not how you like to watch your football.
Yeah.
Remember to subscribe to Majority 54 wherever you listen to audio podcasts. Just search Majority 54 and please leave a 5-star review. Thank you to the Meidas Mighty. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.